Welcome to Quit to Win, the show where we explore the moment people have to let go of destructive pattern, limiting identity, and the internal battle to rebuild their life with purpose and clarity. Our three guests is Kristan Swan, a business coach, turn life and spiritual guide, creator of journals and workbook, including the spiritual orthography, workbook, and spaghetti on the wall. And someone who describes herself as experiential learner, which means she learned from her mistake eventually. Christiana turning point was the moment she realized that just because she could do something did not mean she had to, and that by focusing on what truly matters, she made space for herself and for others to find her own. It's really a pleasure and honor having you on the show, Kristen.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you moved 8 times and attended 5 schools by age 12. Reading and your grandparents were your only constant. What did that unstable childhood teach you about finding home inside yourself when the external world keeps shifting?
Thank you for this question. That I will say it was not easy,
Yeah.
right? And having this constantly shifting landscape is very unsettling and also almost doesn't, because everything is changing and you're always trying to adjust to your environment. There is not a lot of time even to figure out where those moments of peace or consistency or safety are, right? Because it's essentially our brain is kind of processing this as, am I safe or am I not safe, right?
Yeah.
And I think, for me, a lot of I was also an only child, so it was just me. So I really learned to rely on myself quite early, meaning that even as a little kid, I learned how to prepare my own food. I learned how to, clean my room and do laundry and things like that so that I could take care of those kind of physical needs. And then I think just for my inner world, fortunately, I learned how to read very, very early. And I think that my imagination, whether it was through reading or drawing or listening to music, those were really important ways for me to probably what I wasn't realizing at the time, right? Because I'm young, is I'm kind of learning how to regulate my nervous system. Right. I'm learning how to just kind of reduce the anxiety that's being caused by this shifting landscape that I exist in.
Yeah, it's really a whole lot and having to make friends at every new location and having to do those things without a prototype or a model before you to learn from that. It's a lot. So now your coach is business owner for years and kept noticing talented visionaries or people head back because they do not really know themselves. And then you realize you were doing the exact same thing in your own personal life. What did that reckoning feel like?
Well, it definitely caught my attention, and I'm always willing to laugh at myself. So, here I was.
Yeah.
Engaging with these business owners. Most of them were independent business owners and entrepreneurs. So, we're working very closely kind of on their whole life because their businesses are so intertwined with their personal life. And I'm, noticing how there's this deep kind of misalignment often between what they're saying that they want for themselves and what their actions are. And that's when I first developed Spaghetti on the Wall, the journal, because it was a way to kind of sit with yourself and hopefully notice some of those patterns. And so I make Spaghetti on the Wall, the journal, and as I'm also doing the journal, I'm realizing, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I'm doing in my own life. I had married a second time after my first divorce, and I really hadn't taken the time that was necessary after my first marriage ended for just to grieve and to really, I don't know, understand kind of how I got to the place I had gotten to, right? And instead, I just kind of pushed away so much of that feeling, in part because I had little kids and I needed to work. And so I don't want to be too hard on myself, but I kind of just kept going without any reflection, and found myself in this next relationship that was not it was not the right choice for me, and I was doing everything I could do to even though I was saying this is like my clients, right? That I want to, that I know that I am this type of person and that I can be a certain type of person. I was making choices. I was living a life that was not in alignment with the person that I knew myself to be. Right. And really just kind of working a ton, kind of distracting myself with work and which is, and what's funny about it is, of course, the things that I was choosing to distract myself with were all very socially acceptable
Yeah.
things, right? It's like, oh, that's great that you're such a hard
Yeah.
worker, or that's great that that you are volunteering at your kid's school, like you're helping out, but at the end of the day, all of this busyness that I was creating for myself, there were nuggets of it that were authentic in terms of what was meaningful to me, and certainly supporting my kids' education is very meaningful to me, and being a hard worker is also something that I know myself to be, but the way that I was doing it was really in disservice to myself.
Yeah. Your turning point though was realizing that just because you could do something did not mean you had to. How long
Yeah.
had you been doing things simply because you could? And what was the cost of that before clarity arrived?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It I will say that this process of self-discovery, self-awareness, all of that, for anyone who's listening, it is not a linear process, right? I think you get moments and bits of clarity and awareness come to you, right? And it's almost like packing a suitcase for a trip, right? You before I go on a trip, I like to kind of think about where I'm going and what the weather is going to be, right? What am I going to be doing? And so I'm kind of thinking about these different pieces. Do I need to bring a jacket? Which shoes? And I think that our kind of the way that we accumulate this experience and awareness and self-discovery is similar to that packing of a suitcase for a trip. Is we're kind of pulling from different pieces, and it's not that we're just starting at one point and going straight through. So for me, this idea of really the realization of that just because I can do something doesn't mean that it is actually something that is really meaningful to me, right? Or that it is something that I should be doing. And I'm careful to use that word should, because it's a little tricky, but I'll give you an example. It's because one of the ways, again, kind of relating back to those early days when there's so much chaos and there's uncertainty in my upbringing, one of the ways that I learned to cope was to be very, very helpful, right?
Mm.
To offer to help, because and that was a way of kind of blending in, right, to my circumstances, and or even like at a new school to offer to do, help the teacher do something, or help on.
Yeah.
And that was a way to kind of get more information about my place. And that just became such an automatic habit for me. And it also was feeding my ego, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm getting a lot of, a lot of praise for always
Yeah.
being the one to raise your hand and offer to do the thing. And again, I think that kind of the theme that I'm trying I guess that I'm sharing today is when we are always doing there, it's almost, or at least I'll speak for myself, it's impossible to take that time that is necessary to pause and sit with yourself and say, is this really something that, is this something that I love to do? Is this something that brings me great joy? Is this something that is directly related to kind of my core values, right? And how I want to show up in the world. And I'm not suggesting that we don't want to be of service to others, but I'm merely suggesting that there's also another thing that happens, that I'm suggesting that by being that person that is always doing, we miss the opportunity to connect with ourselves in a way that helps us build a life that is much more in alignment.
Yeah.
And we also take that opportunity for others to be participating and doing, right? That there may be someone, like when I'm offering to, I don't know what the thing is, but when I'm offering to volunteer or be of service for this one thing that, yes, I can do it, but is it really my thing? I take the opportunity from someone else who might really love this thing. So I share that because I think that sometimes there can be a sense that this journey of self-awareness or self-discovery is very selfish, right? That it somehow is, you're all focused on yourself
Yeah.
and you're just, you're self-absorbed. And I don't see it that way. I think that when we can each kind of be in our fullness, the people that we are meant to be, and that means that I'm going to be my full self is going to be very different from you, right? And that's the beauty of it, because then when I'm kind of doing my thing, that allows you hopefully to do your thing. And then we can actually come into collaboration and be so much more together.
A whole lot to really get to Kristan here, and the fact that, yeah, just doing and doing before was covering a particular loophole that you were not willing to admit, and it was just feeding you more, like having the dopamine and just keep going and receiving all the praises. And still, it's more like a vehicle that just keep going. And instead of parking to get to see where am I really going, yeah, you were not doing that, but you don't know the direction it was heading, but still you were just more like caught up in it. And really a whole lot to
Yeah.
get to.
Well, and I think that there in our world, right? There is there's a sense that, and that's why I love your program so much, is this quit to win, right? Is how important it is for us to be willing to pause and slow down and that even feels like quitting, right?
Yeah.
Because we are in this just, 24/7 cycle, or we can be. And so that feels like a radical idea to say, oh gosh, I'm going to slow down a little bit and figure out kind of if I'm going the right direction. And as you were saying in your introduction, right? I mean, having the courage really to say, yeah, this may have fit me in the past. It no longer is a fit, or that maybe I was doing this, maybe I was doing this because I wanted other people to see me a certain way,
Yeah.
right? I wanted to do it for affirmation or for love. Or maybe I was doing it because I was comparing myself to other people that I admire. And so I kind of started mimicking what they did rather than being more curious about who they are.
So after that, you pivoted out from business coaching to life and spiritual guidance. So what did that transition require you to quit of? About how you had defined your own values and expertise?
Yeah. So I will start by saying it was highly, highly uncomfortable, because it had taken me so long to actually to transition from my previous career into business coaching and to be taken seriously as a business coach. So I feel like I finally had gotten to that place where, okay, so people understood the work that I did as a business coach. I had clients, and really I had reached the point where I was pretty exhausted, and the pandemic certainly had something to do with that. And I'm so grateful that I was there to support my clients, and that they did as well as they did. And I felt really depleted. And so I went back to school, and I thought that that would provide kind of a path, because I'm usually the person, you're going to find this hard to
Yeah.
believe, but I'm usually the person that knows exactly what they're doing next, right? And I usually know what I'm doing next before I've even stopped doing the thing that I'm doing currently. And I didn't know where I was going to go. And I just knew, though, that I was mentally and physically exhausted. So I went back to school, and I thought, well, I can teach maybe, and realized that that probably wasn't a good fit for just kind of who I was in terms of having been an entrepreneur
Yeah.
and self-employed for so
Yeah.
many years. And so I told myself, you know what, you're not going to rush into your next thing. You're going to sit and thankfully I was hired as a writer and consultant on a project. So I had something to kind of give me some structure, and I had a part-time job that I could rely on. And I told myself the rest of my time, I'm going to be sitting with this idea of what is the next thing. And boy, it was not it because it wasn't like it was taking so long. I mean, I was getting so impatient. I'm also very impatient. And I was like, I don't know what it's going to be. And this is so frustrating to me. And I was getting close to the end of the time that I had kind of allowed myself for this sitting, right? This pause. And then it came to me that I was deeply concerned that people were not talking to each other in a kind of open and kind manner. I felt like people were getting increasingly calcified in these their beliefs that also led them to believe that there was a deep separation from who they were and the people that had similar beliefs and everyone else. And I thought, it doesn't have to be a big thing, but what is one little thing I can do to be bringing people together in conversation about things that they normally don't talk about? And so I went back to a class, or an element of a class that I had taught decades ago. And that element was the spiritual autobiography. And so I ended up creating a curriculum, and eventually it's now a workbook. And I do workshops and other live events where I get people together. And the basis of it is really it's not a new concept, but it's based on storytelling, right? I mean, it is really the examination of the stories that we tell ourselves, right?
Yeah.
All this stuff. It's thinking about those stories that we've inherited or that we've acquired along the way. And then it's also the sharing out of stories with others. And I think that's such a powerfully human way of connecting with each other that really can transcend, our day-to-day assumptions, and hopefully allow us to be willing to ask if some of our own stories that we need to quit some of our
Yeah.
own stories, right?
Yeah. Good. And I think those stories are very important because it gives room for self-evaluation, and through the self-evaluation, we can see ourselves in a better light of knowing whether it's something to actually more like get to quit from, or whether it's something to kind of double down on. Yeah, it really holds.
Yeah.
And so you believe that you believe in a kind of generous universe, and you hold that belief
Yeah.
alongside divorce, our struggles and disappointment. How do those two things coexist, and what kept the belief in that when the evidence seems to be contradicting it?
Yeah. Well, what I will say, yes, and I don't want to minimize for me, how just devastating the first divorce was, and even the second divorce. I mean, in different ways, and the deep, hurt, and that it wasn't just me. I mean, it's a whole collection of people. It impacts, your whole family when something like this happens. And there's been other things in my life that have been, not quite as painful or devastating, but I mean, some, very hard moments. And I think for some reason, ever since I was little, and maybe it was because I had this very kind of deep engagement with my imagination I've always been optimistic, and I've always had a sense of that there is kind of a goodness that is out there. And so I think that as a realistic optimist, I do believe that there is, a positive outcome. I do know that I am probably a much wiser, kinder person today because of my struggles and my ability to finally face those, and especially face those really hard feelings of shame and guilt and loss. And that I think also that what happens when you are willing to do some self-reflection is you do recognize so many times in your life where the thing that ended up happening, you never could have imagined. You never, I used to do this thing because it kind of made me somehow oddly feel better, as I would imagine the worst case scenario, right? And you think about the worst case scenario, and you can do this whole, you can really go pretty far with that worst case scenario. And then I realized, you know what? Actually, the worst case scenario, thank goodness, doesn't generally come to pass. What comes to pass is this entirely other scenario that I never could have imagined. And that ability to draw on my own history of glimpses of that realm of possibility helped me maintain my faith.
Yeah, amazing. It's really lovely and just speak volumes to the fact that, yeah, every of those particular stories, every of those particular, more like a past and experience actually shape us to make better decisions and make us to live, better owing to the fact that, there's a whole lot of information to actually more like leverage on now to us becoming better, to us staying curious. And yeah, it's really amazing. So you describe curiosity as one of the most powerful tools we have. What does leading with curiosity require the person to quit, especially someone who has been taught that not knowing is weakness?
Yeah. Well, curiosity, I love just because I think that when you are truly curious, meaning that you have an openness, right, to asking questions. And I think it's important that we realize that oftentimes it's not the answers that are the thing, right? It's actually in the questions that we end up having the potential for more kind of learning. And so I love to encourage people to lead with curiosity, and because I think it has, as I mentioned, I think that there's this openness to curiosity. And when I say curiosity, it's very different. I want to be clear that there are times when it's not just about asking questions, right? Because sometimes curiosity can be about being silent and
Yeah.
listening, right? And being willing to just observe, right? So, and sometimes that listening is listening to yourself, right? What is getting, maybe that curiosity is saying, okay, I'm going to shut my brain off for a second. I'm going to listen to my heart. Right. So curiosity isn't necessarily always about asking questions. And I think also we have to be careful that when we are asking questions, are we asking questions that we are truly open to the answer and to not only hearing the answer, but really listening to the answer and taking it in, right? Because I think we have a little bit of a habit of asking questions that we already have the answer to. So I love this idea of curiosity giving us this openness, and also are truly operating from a curious mindset. You are being present. You are being present to the moment that you are in. And that's so vital because that is slowing you down, right? Going back to this idea of pausing and slowing down. And the times that we tend to begin to ignore our true selves are when we start leaping into the future or we start giving kind of undue weight to the past.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Which, yeah, curiosity is not much of the answers you get from the questions, but the process you actually more like engage in asking the questions. Yeah, it's really, really a whole lot and just speak volumes to, yeah, not asking from the perspective of already knowing the answers, but the fact that, yeah, you actually want to just explore a whole lot of things beyond the particular template you already had. Yeah, amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
So for someone who starts to know themselves better today, not 6 months from now, what is the first step?
The first step, gosh, I would just find a way to reconnect with your whole self. I think that there is, whether it's our kind of our reliance on technology or again, perhaps our upbringing, I think that so often people that I'm interacting with and talking with is there has been kind of a fracturing, right? Or there's been a sense that there are parts of ourselves that we had to kind of, tamper down or box up and put in the back closet. So whether it's breath work and just simply taking several deep breaths and inhales and complete exhales, I mean, that is always, I know that I'm not recommending anything new, but that is such a powerful way of coming back into yourself. And of course, I'm a big believer in journaling. I think that actually putting a pen to paper is so powerful because again, it's requiring you to slow down because you can only write so fast, right? Your
Yeah,
brain can be thinking a million miles. And I think that's what's so hard about, a lot of people thinking about maybe trying meditation or something like that, which I love meditation. However, it can be very challenging if you feel like I don't know how to quiet my body or my brain, whereas journaling is kind of this way of focusing that energy in your body to holding in the pen and writing the words and also slowing down that brain. And I think that there's something quite amazing that happens when you take those thoughts and you commit them to the page, not for anyone else to see. And not even that you have to, review them later, but there is something really magical that happens. And so I love to encourage people to journal. And when I talk about journaling, I'm talking about 10 minutes a day. And if 10 minutes feels like too long, then start with a list of 3 things that are on your mind right
yeah,
now. Right.
yeah.
It doesn't have to be this big thing, right? It doesn't have to be hours and hours, just little bits.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has really been amazing. Yeah, slow down, take that walk, write your thought down, journal, and yeah, anything that just make you more like put down the heavy load of carrying everything at the same time and having to just look
Mm.
inward. Amazing. Thank you so much. So for my audience who would love to connect with you, either for your coaching section, the life coach, or your book, or more like those who want to connect with you, how can they reach out and where is the best platform?
Yeah, I have a website. It's called KristanSwan.com. So that is a great place to take a look at the journals and see the work that I do. And for people who are on social media, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok. So, and again, Kristan Swan, Kristan with an A and Swan, SWAN.
Yeah, thank you so much, Krista. Thank you
Oh,
for your
thank
reminder
you.
that your stories is still being written, and that self knowledge is the foundation. Everything else is built on. Is the one this audience is going to be needed. And for my audience who would love to reach out, I'll check the show notes, and you'll see the link to actually connect with Christy. Remember that just because you can does not mean you have to. Focus on what truly matters, and everything else will find its place. Once again, it's really a pleasure and honor have you on the show, Christy.
Thank you.